Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for September 2021. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator. And this month we're going to be going over the sequence view and how to get the most out of it. Okay, so if you haven't done it already, go ahead and open up Total Quilter and we're going to load in a file. And we're going to use a file that I know you all have. So we're going to go over here to our library, and you want to pick the Animals library, and then come to the Designs tab. If you hover over it, you'll see the designs. Bring the cursor back over this bear, and click and drag it into the screen here. So just go ahead and click and drag it into the screen. It will be big like this. It doesn't look a whole heck of a lot like a bear at this magnification. It looks pretty weird. If I turn on 3D though, it doesn't really help it. If I zoom out, so I'm going to come up here to my magnifier and click zoom out, and I will recenter this. Let me select everything and come down here to the center and click off it. You can see it looks a little clearer. So this is what it's going to look like when you have an actual stitch out. So let's go ahead and zoom back all the way into it here. And one of the things I did in the sequence view just now was one of the things I wanted to show you, and that is an easy way to select things over here in the design is you can click on them. I could drag a box around the whole thing to select it. But if I want to select everything, I can just come over here to the sequence view and click on all items, and it selects everything. If I wanted to just select this red satin stitch circle around the outside, I could simply click on it and it would select that. So using the sequence view here to select things is quite convenient a lot of the times, especially when there's stuff layered and sometimes you can't quite click on the thing, you're getting the underlay underneath or whatever. Selecting it with the sequence view can be a real time saver. So before we get into more in the sequence view, you'll notice over here that in the sequence view we have Madeira rayon thread colors, and that's the way that this file was made originally for Madeira rayon. Of course, we all like to use Floriani poly. So I'm going to show you a cool way to change all of these colors all at once into Floriani poly or any other thread chart that you have. So if I come down here to my thread window down here, I've got a match palette button here. Now this is fairly new, came out a few updates ago. I will click it, and it gives me a choice of what I want to match it to. And I see Floriani poly right here in my list. So if I click that, boom, with one click, it changes all the colors to match the closest Floriani colors in the Floriani color palette that were in the Madeira thread palette. And so now we have our bear in the Floriani colors. All right, so that's one cool little tip that you can use if you want to change colors. Of course, you can change them one color at a time. Like if I don't like this gold here, if I don't like, that's actually, they're calling it a Miranda green. If I want to change it to a different color, like let's say I want to change it to, I don't know, let me just find a better gold here. Let's change it to this gold. And I could just click on it, having selected it over here, and that changes it. Well, they're calling that a green too. If I don't like that, I'll just click the undo button to go back to the way it was. So let's continue with our exploration of the sequence view. You'll notice here that I've got 4 different items, and these represent the 4 different color stops that are in the design. So we have a red color stop, a gold or green one here, a dark gray one, and a beige. And each one of these is going to sew out as that color stop and then prompt me to change the color on the machine to the next thread color. This is what we call the top level of that particular color stop. And you'll notice over here there's a little plus sign. If I click that plus sign, it's going to open up and show me all of the things that are underneath it. All right, so I've actually got 3 different objects. I've got a run stitch, so that's the underlay under this satin stitch, and you can see it highlighted in blue there. We have the actual satin path itself. Then I have this little tiny run here, which is really hard to see over here, but I can tell you that that is the lock stitch at the end of the satin path. Right, so I've got these 3 items here. If I click on this one, if I expand it, and I scroll down with my scroll button here on my mouse, you can see I've got a lot more items. I've got runs and satins, and they're all interspersed here. So these satin paths are interspersed with run stitches, which is what you would expect from looking at the way this design is digitized. Okay, so I've got all these satins and runs. If this design had fills in it, which it doesn't, I would also see fills in here as well. So I can select all of that color by clicking here, or if I just want to select a part of it, like this satin path here, I can select it, and you see it just selected that little piece. If I click on this, notice that everything got selected. That's because this design is grouped. But when I select things over here in the sequence view, it sort of bypasses the grouping for selection. So it lets me select things here without having the group interfere with it. I can ungroup this design. I'm going to use this little ungroup icon right here to ungroup it. Now if I click that satin stitch, okay, now I just see that satin stitch, and you can see it also gets highlighted in blue over here in the sequence view. Now you'll notice that there's a little number behind each one. What is that number? That is actually the number of stitches that are in that path. So this is 21 stitches, this is a little 3-stitch run, this is 20 stitches, this is a bigger satin, so it has 98 stitches. So that tells me the number of stitches in that particular segment. Alright, so if I wanted to change the color of one of these, I could do it just to that one particular piece if I wanted to, instead of changing the color for the whole thing. So again, this allows me to see the individual and select the individual parts that make this up. And if I click the little minus sign now, I collapse that level. That's what we call it, collapsing and expanding. Right? If everything is expanded, and I don't have everything expanded, but this is close enough, I can also right-click in my sequence view, and I can either collapse everything back to the top level, or I can right-click and say expand all, and it expands all. So that's a little shortcut you can do to collapse and expand everything. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything here. What else can we do here? Let's look at the other icons over here by the plus. So I've got a little eyeball by each one of these top level items, and that means visibility. So when it's lit up like this, that means this particular segment is visible. If I click it, it will hide it. Okay, so you see how my red circle went away over here? If I hide the gold, that part of the design will go away. So this is kind of useful if I'm trying to select things inside other stuff and there's stuff over behind it and I don't want to accidentally select that and I don't want to go use my lasso tool to do that. I can actually hide various elements to kind of temporarily get them out of the way. So when they're hidden, I can't select them. Okay, so I can make them visible again. And the last thing is this little lock icon here. What that does is it locks this segment so I can't select it and I also can't move it or do anything with it. There's also a similar lock segment over here, but I can do it right here. So if I click that lock segment, now I can't select that set of stitches. It looks like I can select it here, but if I try to move it or do anything with it, nothing's going to happen because it's locked. So sometimes that's real useful to keep you from selecting something you don't want to select but you still want to see it. You can use the lock icon to do that. or if you want to make sure something always stays in that place no matter what you're doing to the rest of the design, you don't accidentally move it or whatever, you can use the lock icon here to do that. So I'm going to unlock it, and let's see what else we can do here. Now when I right click, I've got some more options. I've got show all, and I've got add note, and I've got the properties. So we're going to ignore properties because that just makes the properties box here go away and come back. We're not going to click on that. All right, but let's look at what show all does. So if I click show all right now, nothing changes because everything was showing. But here's what's really cool. If I want to just say work on this dark gray color here, and I don't want to go in and hide everything else like this one at a time, so I can then just work on this dot color and not be distracted by the rest of it. Because with only 4 items, that's okay. But if I have a design with a lot of items, it can get very tedious. What I can do instead is I can just right click on the gray top level, and I have a hide other. So if I click hide other, that changes it so that everything else gets hidden. You see all the eyeballs went away on everything but the gray. And that's what show everything else does. So if I right click and I say show all, then that brings everything back. So I've got hide other and show all. Now again, when I right click out here where there's nothing, that's kind of all I can do except to add a note. And I can't really even add a note here because I don't have anything selected. So this ought to actually be grayed out because over here I can't actually insert anything. All right, but if I right click on, say, this red, I've got a lot more options. I can cut it, I can copy it, I can delete it, I can group it, I can distribute, I can preserve it as stitches, I can remove the overlap stitches, I can add a note. Now you can see these things are lit up. So I could insert it before this or insert it after. So let's insert it after, and it comes up here and it lets me pick a note that's already in there. I don't have anything saved, but I can put in here, say, let's put in red satin stitch. Now this is a not very useful note to add, but if you were giving instructions, you see it added this note here. That is very useful if you're doing something like creating an applique. You can come in here and you can put in, okay, put down your fabric now, or something to that effect. So when people print out the thread chart from this, they will see this note here. If you do an applique with the software, the built-in appliques, it automatically adds those notes for you. If I right click on this, I actually have the ability to edit the note, or I can delete the note. So let me go ahead and delete that note. All right, so if I mistype the note, I can edit it. Right? What else can we do if I right click on a color? I told you all about all the other stuff. Remove overlap stitches won't do anything in this design because there's nothing overlapping. But let's look at move. Okay, this is really useful. Move lets me move the segments anywhere I want in the design. So I can move it to the first position. Well, you'll notice that's grayed out because it already is in the first position. I can move it to the last position. I could move it up. Now this one I can't move up because I don't have anything above it. It's the top one already. Or I can move it down, or I can go to the next match. And I'll show you what next match does in a bit, because there's no color to match it to. This matches to the next color that's like it. And this is useful if you want to like combine colors together. And we're going to go over that here in just a second. But let's just look at these other for now. So let's do last. Okay, so that moves it to the last position. So it would stitch out last instead of first. Now, if I don't want it there, I can do an undo, or I can right click on it and I can hover over move and click first, and it'll put it back in the first position. All right, so that's what you get when you right click on a item. When you right click in a blank area in the sequence view, you get a slightly different menu because not all the options are there for you. All right, so let's take a look at what match move does. All right, let's go ahead and change this color right here to the same color here. Let's make that a red. All right, so the way I would do that is I already know I have this red in my design. If I come down to my thread palette, it's right here. So this is my design palette. These are the threads I could change it to, but I want to change it to one that I know is already in my design. So if I simply click on that, now I've got that red twice. All right. Now, if I don't want to change the thread, if I want to leave it on and sew this one next, if my design would allow it, and I don't know if this one would or not, you'd have to look at it closely to figure that part out. It looks like it might be okay. There's a little bit of an overlap here, but I think if it went the other way, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So let's move this up to stitch right after the circle. So I've got two ways I could do that. I can right click and I can click a move, and I can just do a move up. All right, and that'll actually move it up. And I'm going to undo that move because there's actually a third way you can do it, and that is simply by dragging it. So if I click it and I drag it, I can move it around in the sequence view. Now the way this works is, if I want it to go beneath something, like I want it to go beneath this red circle right here, I can't just drag it right here. It'll just go right back to where it was because it goes underneath whatever you're on top of. So if I want it to go underneath the first red, I put it on top of the first red and it shows up there. Right, so that's another way to do it, but I'm going to undo that again because now I want to show you the match. So if I right click on it and I do a move previous match or next match, all right, what this does is it allows it to find the match of color above it. All right, so if I click it, it'll move it to the color that matches it, either above or below. All right, so now here's something I want to talk about. These, like I said, represent color stops. So this would be okay. Let's say I wanted to sew this just like this. Here's what would happen when I went in the real world to sew it. It would sew the circle and my machine would stop because there's a color stop in here. All right, and then it would ask me to put the same color on the machine and then stitch it again. All right, if I don't want it to stop, I just want it to continue on, I have to get rid of the color stop. All right, if I click on this one, okay, there's nothing here that lets me do that. All right, I can't get rid of the stop. But if I click on this one below it, notice that I now have something called remove stop. All right, so if I click remove stop, that changes it so that now all of these are now at the same level. It's still going to sew in the same sequence, but instead of having a stop in there, it is going to sew and just continue on. It's probably going to cut and jump over here, but it's going to sew these two things without stopping the machine and prompting me to change the color. Now I'm going to undo that because there's another way you can do it. And this is useful if you want to do it to things that are not contiguous necessarily. All right, let's say you have a whole bunch of things. You don't want to go in there and remove stop, remove stop, remove stop, remove stop. So if I had like 20 of these red items all in a row, I don't want to have to go in and remove the stops. So here's a shortcut. If I click one of them and then I control click on the other that I want, and I can keep control clicking on as many of those as I want, or I can do a click on the first one, and if I had 3 of these, I could shift click on the last one, and it would select everything in a line. So it would select everything between my first click and my last click. Since there's only 2, it does the same thing, but if I had 5 and I shift clicked it on the last one, it would select them all. So now to get rid of the stop, I can do a trick. Instead of having to find the remove stops for everything and click them, I can come back over here to the same color and click it, and that reassigns that color all over again to all of those elements and gets rid of all the stops in the process. So those are some cool things you can do with the sequence view. I'm going to undo that because I want to show you a couple of other things. All right, if we look at this red item here, again, if we expand it, you can see we've got a combination of runs and satins. All right, now these runs are typically little connector stitches or underlay, and if I wanted to go in and change, say, the density of these satins or something, I don't want to have to select them all like this, control click them all, and find them all and scroll through this whole sequence view, because I don't really care about the runs. All right, so what I can do is I can use this show function up here at the top. So here I've got all segments and all colors by default. So this shows me everything in the sequence view. All right, but if I just want to, in fact, let's go to a different color because I got 2 red colors here now. Let's go to this Miranda green color here. All right, again, if I expand it, you can see I've got all these items in here. If I just want to work with this color, I can go hide everything else, but I can also do it by changing this all colors selection to Miranda green. All right, now it is just showing me that one level, and that's it. If I had more than one, it would show me all of them, but in this design, it's just showing me this one. All right, now let's say I want to select just the satin paths in here. So now I can do the same trick, but instead of using colors, I'm going to use segments. So I'm going to click on the down arrow there and select satin path. Now you can see all I see is the satin paths. All right, so now if I want to change the density of them, it's very simple. I can click the first one and I'll come down here to the bottom one and click it, and you can see here that I've got all these different satin paths here selected. So that's how I use this part of the sequence view to show certain stitch types and certain colors. All right, so I'm going to change it back to all segments and all colors, and I'll collapse that, and I'm back to where I was, except for this is no longer gray, it's now a red. All right, now I probably don't want that, probably have to go change it back, but you get the idea. This is what happens in the sequence view, and if you use it correctly and you get used to using the sequence view the right way, then it's going to make your usage of Total Quilter or My Decorative Quilter a lot more powerful. So I want to thank you for watching, and I want to invite you to come back next month for another edition of Total Quilter Monthly.